So, not too long ago, I met up with a friend and fellow YouTuber and photographer named TC. You can check his links out down in the description box below. But we went out to the Gettysburg Battlefield and we kind of just had a photo walk during a sunset session. And this is one of the photos that came of it. So we agreed that we would both edit a photo and then share it. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to edit this photo and then share it. And I want you guys to go check out TC's rendition of the photo that he decided to select from our trip at Gettysburg. Now, the very first thing that I'm going to do with this image is change the color, or the camera profile, I should say. And I think I want to go with landscape. I want to go with something that's a little bit more ethereal in this particular photo. Now, I did crop this, or I'm sorry, photograph this using the rule of thirds in camera. So you can see that the red barn is on the lower third here. And then I put this tree on the upper third. And, you know, there's a lot of information over here on the right, and it kind of just leads over to the left. And I left the top of the frame untouched. I think I got the exposure just the way that I want it to in camera. We'll take a look at the histogram. Yep, looks good. And if I hold down the J key on the keyboard, you can see I have not blown out any of my highlights, and I don't have anything in shadow. So this is one of those times when exposing your photo properly really does pay off, because you can just jump right into modifying the photo in a way that brings more character. All right, so now that we're in the local adjustments tab, and all I did was reset the actual local adjustment, what I want to do is modify the highlights in the background over here. To do that, all I'm going to do is pull down on the highlight slider just a little bit, about -32. That could be heavy-handed, but we'll see. I am using 40% opacity just so I can paint over in this area. And I'm slowly going to build this up because I only want to reduce the highlights just a bit. And, you know, I may need to bring down the exposure just a little bit. So let's pull down on the exposure. And what I don't want to do is make a drastic change like this and then cause the entire area to just look discolored. But instead, what I want to do is just pull it down until it just gets a little less interesting, because I really want the focus to come to this barn, which is relatively small in the frame, but I'm okay with that because it gives a sense of context that this is a story of an image, or at least an image with a story about a barn, and I'm okay with that. So now that I have those highlights modified, I think these trees in the background could probably use a little bit of this adjustment. So I'm just going to paint over them one time with that 40% opacity. I think that that's enough just to get rid of that haze back there and make the trees look a little bit better, in my opinion. All right, so we'll call this BGHL Reduce. It's always a good idea to name your edits, or your adjustments, I should say. So the next thing I want to do is really modify the color in the image, because like I said, I want to make a ethereal feel. So I think this time I am going to grab the color enhancer, and that's just a good go-to for pretty much any form of color modification. Even though I do have a video that shows how you can modify color using the local adjustments tab, which was a more popular video than I expected. But with that being said, what I want to do is see what I can make happen with these greens. I'm not quite feeling the way that these greens look, so I'm going to start with the yellow and maybe pull it to the left. And that's not really doing much of anything in the green area. Like if I pull it all the way to the left, that looks kind of good, but I'm not really feeling that. So maybe if I pull it to the right. All right, so now that we have the greens looking pretty decent, not quite what I was going for, so maybe we can modify them a little bit more on the green channel itself. And I guess what I'm looking for is more of a yellowish green look here, so that's why I'm not really feeling that. Maybe I just need to pull this more to the orange and then maybe move this towards the yellow. No, that's not working either. Okay, this is just how you go. So on the fly, I think I actually like the greens moved more to the green side. Maybe not that green, but something along the lines like 11 that works for this particular image. And what I want to do is maybe saturate them. Yeah, if I push a little bit more saturation into those greens, I think it looks pretty good. Now, what I want to do with this barn is maybe make the red a little bit more prominent. So I'm going to saturate it quite a bit. And then we'll play around with the brightness, because the only thing that should be getting affected with this red slider, and in fact, I'll pull up and pull down just to see. And these are like super subtle adjustments. So I'm sorry that it may not be coming through perfectly on YouTube, but the goal that I'm going for is to make this barn just a little bit more punchy. Now, I think what I'm going to end up doing is actually using the encircling tool to select the barn the way that I would like it to be selected, but we'll see. So I'll turn this off and turn it on, and I think I like where this is going so far. I'm kind of liking the way that this looks. Now, I'm not going to rename the color enhancer because I don't think that really needs to be renamed. The next thing that I'll do, because, I'm just experimenting here, and this is what I recommend everyone does with their photos. Just experiment a little bit. I think what I'll do is throw a blur on here. I have no idea how this is going to work, but I'm going to go with a surface blur. Yeah, okay. I think I could work with this. Maybe pull up the threshold so that way it's a little bit more refined of a blur, and maybe pull down the amount. And what I'm going to do is punch a hole through this. So hitting the letter M on my keyboard and then grabbing the Vignette tool, I'm just going to click right over the barn because that's the point of interest that I have in this particular image. And I'm just going to rotate this so that way it goes over the barn nicely. And maybe just spread this out so it doesn't look too obvious that I put a blur, but you can just naturally start to see what's going on, how this is impacting the image. So if I turn this off and on, you can see it really just takes away some of the detail in that bush up there or the tree up here, which is good, but I think we can do better. So I'm going to leave that alone. And what I want to do is add some like brightness to this overall image. I'm going to use the curves filter to do that. And I'm just going to pull up on the highlights. You see how that's getting brighter? And then what I'm going to do is test out a blend mode. Usually overlay or soft light yields some pretty interesting results. We can look at screen. Screen doesn't look too bad. And then lighten. Maybe lighten will work for what I'm trying to accomplish here, which is that bright, soft look and really just enhancing the glow. But ultimately, this is way too heavy. So I'm going to pull down on the opacity to about here. And I think that just brightens up the image in a nice way. There's so many ways that you could brighten up an image, but I just think that this way works a little bit more nice. Don't know if I can say nice enough in this particular video. So the next thing that I want to do is throw in some film grain, because I think that film grain really does add to the character of an image, but I think we got to zoom in to really see the grain, and I want this to be some pretty large grain, so I'm just going to pull up on this. And I usually go with something like a 400, and that's not as gritty as I would like it to be. You could barely see it. Like if I turn this off and on, you could see it over here in this area, but it's just not very prominent. So let's go with something like let's see what 3200 gives us. Now 3200 really does grain up and make the photo a little bit more gritty. So if we zoom out, you can really see that now. So now if I just pull down on the amount, this gets us in the ballpark of kind of where I was going. So if you turn off the preview and then you turn it back on, you can see it just changes the overall feel and aesthetic. And I don't know how well that comes through on YouTube, but the last thing that I'll add, and every time I say the last thing, I never really add the last thing, but I'm going to go with an antique filter. And I think I will go with one of these more saturated looking filters. I just got to find one that really fits for this image, which I think Istanbul probably works well. So we'll go with that. And the thing with these filters is you don't want to necessarily just leave them as is. You usually always want to mess around with some form of a blend option. So I'm going to come in here and just kind of filter through these to see which ones give me a look that's unique and creative. So the color one actually works out quite well relative to the normal, because it's only impacting the color. And I've been a huge fan of the color blend mode lately. And the reason for that is it just modifies the color. So whenever you're working on an image, if you only want to modify the color, then it works great. So working with the saturation overall and maybe something like that. And then we can just brighten this up maybe. Pulling it to the left actually looks pretty cool. So I think that that works out quite well. Now what I want to do is, I feel like there's just too much brightness up here, and it's taken away from the barn down at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is add a filter, and I'm just going to use a simple vignette filter, because I think that a big softy on this could really do us some good. And I will need to make the feather, because I want to make sure that I put it more around the barn. And then I'm just going to grab the little tool here and we'll drag this over, and let's reduce the size, maybe like that, and maybe make it a little bit more round. And this is an exaggeration, but I think it's going to work out quite well. So I'll pull up the feather all the way, and all I'm going to do is reduce that. And I think that this complements the photo pretty good overall. So if I were to take away this particular, all of the edits, and then pull them all the way back up, you can see what happens there. Now, what I really, really enjoy, and I guess I haven't tried this on too many photos, is you get blend modes for the entire layer stack or effect stack. And I think that that is awesome, because this is putting all of those layers or all of those effects into one blend mode. And, you know, if you do this right, and right is relative, right? But if you do it right, you could get some pretty unique results, I think. Like, this is actually not a terrible look. And all I ever do is try to go for unique looks. But I think I'm gonna leave it on normal for today. We'll just go ahead and close that. But what I may do is just blend this a little bit more with the original or the photo straight out of camera. So now if I turn it off and turn it back on, you can see there is a little bit of a difference in the overall image. Now, like I told you before, every time I say I'm only going to do one more thing, I tend to do another thing. And I don't think that this is over baking the photo. I think that everything I'm adding right now is pretty subtle. But I'm going to hit surreal, and I'm actually going to invert this particular mask. So, and then take my brush. I'm going to paint this in at 100% opacity because I don't need 40%. I'm going to paint it in over the front here, and that just adds in some of that character and that detail just for the barn, because I don't need it anywhere else. I only need it in the barn, and I'm good with the way that that works. So here is the before, and here's the after. Now, I do recommend that everyone goes and checks out TC's edit of the same photo or a similar photo, because at the point of me recording this, I have no idea what photo he chose to edit for his particular video. But we did agree that we would share each other's information, so that way we're just bringing awareness to photography as a whole. Go over, show some love to TC, support him as he edits through a photo as well. If you guys use the coupon code FreeWillPhotos20, you'll save 20% at checkout, and I get a small commission. You save some money, and I make a little. It's a win-win. Until next time, I want you guys to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.